The Galactic Council was the oldest and most powerful assembly in the known universe. It was made up of the wisest leaders from dozens of alien civilizations, each of them ancient, each of them proud. They had seen empires rise and fall, wars that lasted centuries, and species that vanished into history. In the Council's great chamber, under the light of distant stars, they gathered to speak about a new matter, something small, something young, but something dangerous. That something was humanity. The chamber was vast, carved into the heart of a hollowed asteroid, glowing with energy fields that lit up the curved walls. Alien diplomats sat in floating chairs, their strange bodies shimmering under the light. Some had scaled skin, some had wings, some were little more than clouds of energy. They had gathered because a warning needed to be given. The council speaker, an old being whose kind had lived for millions of years, raised its voice. It spoke of a planet called Earth, a small blue world orbiting a yellow star on the edge of the galaxy. From the outside, Earth seemed unremarkable, just another world with water, land, and a species that had only recently learned how to travel beyond their atmosphere. But humans, the speaker said, were different. They did not grow slowly, like other races. They leapt forward, faster than anyone expected. Where most civilizations spent thousands of years moving from simple tools to machines, humans did it in a fraction of the time. Where most species hesitated before stepping into the stars, humans rushed forward, as if driven by some fire inside them. The speaker described humanity's past. Unlike many other races who grew in peace, humans had been shaped by endless struggle. Their history was filled with wars, with battles fought over land, faith, and power. They had nearly destroyed themselves more than once, yet each time they rebuilt stronger. Where another species might have gone extinct, humans adapted. Where another world would have fallen silent, Earth continued to roar with life. To the Council, this was both fascinating and terrifying. Some of the Council members shifted uncomfortably as the words echoed across the chamber. They remembered the reports. Human ships were small compared to most interstellar fleets, but they were clever. They were built not just for travel, but for survival. Humans had turned everything into a weapon when they needed to. Rocks, metals, even their own environment. Unlike other species who followed strict traditions of warfare, humans invented new strategies in every battle. They never fought the same way twice. The council speaker warned that such a race should not be provoked. They were young, yes. They were inexperienced in the greater politics of the galaxy, yes. But they were unpredictable, and unpredictability was the most dangerous weapon of all. If left alone, they might grow peacefully, becoming allies, perhaps even friends. But if threatened or mocked, they would fight back, and their fight would not be one of measured diplomacy. It would be total. At this, laughter echoed from certain sections of the chamber. Some of the older, stronger civilizations did not believe the warning. They saw humans as nothing more than children playing with fire. To them, humanity was still crawling while others had been walking among the stars for thousands of years. One alien, whose kind ruled over 100 worlds, stood and declared that humans were weak. They had no great fleets, no ancient knowledge, no empire. Why fear ants? It sneered, its voice rumbling across the chamber. Another alien agreed, adding that the council was overreacting. Every young race appeared violent at first, it said. In time, they learned order and discipline. Humans would be no different. Some even argued that instead of avoiding them, the older civilizations should dominate them early, before they became troublesome. That way, Earth would be controlled and useful, instead of wild and dangerous. The council speaker did not answer with anger, but with patience. It explained that humans were not like others. They had already defied expectations. They had faced disasters that would have ended most species, yet each time they rose again. Their bodies were fragile compared to other aliens, but their minds and willpower were stronger than steel. They carried within them something rare, something even the oldest species did not fully understand. A refusal to give up, no matter the odds. That was what made them dangerous. Silence filled the chamber for a moment as the weight of those words hung in the air. Some members nodded in agreement, their memories carrying stories of the strange resilience of humans. Others simply scoffed, unwilling to believe that such a young race could ever threaten them. In the end, the Council issued its warning formally. It advised all civilizations to approach Earth with care. Trade with them if possible, but never provoke them, never attempt to enslave them, and never underestimate them. Humanity was a spark, small, yes, but capable of becoming a fire that no one could control. When the meeting ended, the leaders drifted back to their ships, carrying the Council's words with them. Some left worried, wondering if perhaps the humans truly were a storm waiting to break. Others left laughing, already planning to test these humans for themselves, convinced that they could crush them easily. Far away, on the little blue planet called Earth, humanity knew nothing of this debate. They continued to build, to dream, to reach for the stars. But the galaxy had already begun to whisper about them. A warning had been spoken, one that could change the future of every world. Whether the others listened or not would decide what came next. When the Council's meeting ended, not every voice carried the same weight. The warning about humans spread across the stars, but many chose not to believe it. In the halls of power, in the shining cities of alien empires, the message was dismissed as exaggeration. To them, the idea that a young, fragile race from a single blue planet could be dangerous was almost laughable. Among the most arrogant were the coalition worlds, a group of powerful empires that often worked together to control trade, to settle disputes, and to show their strength. They were proud of their fleets, their technology, and their ancient histories. To them, humans were nothing but upstarts, barely out of their caves, barely learning how to fly ships between the stars. When news reached them that the Council had wasted an entire session warning about Earth, they mocked it openly. On the shining capital of the Thalric's dominion, a meeting of coalition leaders was called. The Thalrics themselves were a towering reptilian species, covered in black scales that glistened under the suns. Their ruler stood tall before the others and laughed at the Council's words. They fear shadows, he declared, his deep voice echoing in the chamber. A species that cannot even spread beyond their own system? They call them dangerous? This is weakness, nothing more. The Council has grown soft. The others agreed. The Velari, a species of crystalline beings, spoke next. Their voices sounded like the ringing of glass. Humans are still bound to their homeworld. They have no colonies, no empire, no fleets worth noting. If they ever did become dangerous, it would take centuries. Why waste fear on them now? Another joined in, a proud warlord from the Gorthak clans. His species was broad and muscular, born from a world of constant battle. He sneered at the very idea that humans could match them. If the humans fight, he growled, then let them. We will break them as we have broken others. Their skulls will decorate our halls. Laughter filled the chamber. The coalition members enjoyed the thought of such a challenge. To them, conquering humans would not be a danger. It would be entertainment, proof to the galaxy that their strength was unmatched. But beneath the laughter, arrogance guided every thought. None of them studied human history as carefully as the Council had. None of them remembered how quickly humans adapted, how they turned every weakness into a weapon. The coalition leaders only saw Earth as a resource-rich world, one that could be dominated and exploited if humanity resisted too much. Soon, plans began to form. Fleets were ordered to prepare, and warships were armed not for defense but for intimidation. The coalition decided they would not just ignore the Council's warning, they would challenge it directly. If the Council claimed humans were dangerous, then the coalition would prove otherwise by showing how easily they could bend Earth to their will. Messages were exchanged between the empires. The plan was simple: send a fleet to the Sol system, the star of humanity's homeworld. Show their power, force the humans to kneel, and return with victory. Not only would this silence the Council's warning, it would also give the coalition control over a new and fertile system. As preparations continued, reports about humans were treated as jokes. Scouts who tried to warn of human unpredictability were dismissed. Records of humanity's long wars were waved aside. Every young species fights among itself, the Velari said. It is nothing new. The Thalric's dominion added, their wars are tiny compared to ours. They have never faced fleets of thousands, weapons that can tear worlds apart. They will surrender once they see our power. The arrogance was so strong that no one questioned what would happen if the humans refused. No one asked what would happen if humanity fought not out of greed or ambition, but out of survival. The thought never crossed their minds. As days passed, the coalition fleets gathered. Ships the size of cities floated in formation, their engines glowing like stars. Crews sang war chants, confident of an easy campaign. To them, it was not a war. It was a show of strength, a reminder to the Council and the galaxy that the coalition ruled by power, not fear. Meanwhile, far across the stars, on Earth itself, humans lived unaware of the storm heading their way. They built their cities, launched their explorers, and dreamed of reaching new worlds. They did not know that arrogant eyes had turned toward them, eyes that saw them as weak prey. But the Council knew. The Council had warned them all, and the Council's silence now was not weakness, it was sorrow. They had spoken the truth, and the truth was ignored. Back in the coalition chambers, the decision was final. The fleets would leave within the cycle. Their mission was to intimidate, to control, and if necessary, to crush. The aliens left the meeting halls proud, laughing at the very thought that humans could resist them. To them, Earth was already theirs, a jewel to be claimed, a victory to be enjoyed. But arrogance often blinds. The coalition did not realize that their laughter would soon turn to silence. They had ignored the Council's warning. They had chosen to test humanity, not with kindness, but with threats and fire. What they did not know was that humanity had already been tested, by themselves, by their history, by their endless will to survive. The fleets were preparing to fly into the unknown, but the unknown was not Earth. The unknown was humanity's true strength, waiting to be revealed. And so the first step was taken, not by humans, but by the arrogant empires who believed themselves untouchable. Their warships began their journey, stars reflecting off their armor, their crews confident of easy glory. None of them knew that what awaited them was not victory, but a lesson. A lesson written not in words, but in fire. The coalition fleet moved like a storm across the stars. Hundreds of alien warships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built, entered the Sol system. Their arrival was impossible to miss. Every telescope on Earth caught sight of the glowing engines. Every satellite picked up the signals. Humanity, for the first time in history, saw the full power of an alien armada entering their skies. At first, the humans thought it was a miracle. For decades, they had dreamed of meeting intelligent life, of speaking with civilizations older and wiser than themselves. Scientists cheered, leaders prepared speeches, and people across the planet waited for a moment that would change history forever. Contact, they believed, would mean knowledge, friendship, and a new age of discovery. But the fleet did not come in peace. The coalition warships spread out in formation, surrounding Earth like wolves circling prey. Their massive hulls blocked the stars, their weapons powered up, glowing with deadly energy. Then came the message. It was broadcast across every frequency, in every language the coalition could translate. The words were sharp, cold, and arrogant. Humans of Earth, you stand before the might of the coalition. You will surrender your weapons, your fleets, and your world. Resistance will mean destruction. Submit, and you may live. Silence followed. On Earth, confusion turned into shock. This was not the welcome humanity had expected. Instead of allies, they had found conquerors. Leaders argued in emergency meetings, wondering if this was a trick, a test, or simply a misunderstanding. Scientists who had studied alien signals begged for patience, hoping diplomacy might work. But the aliens did not wait. To show their power, the coalition fired warning shots. Beams of energy struck the oceans, boiling the waters and sending massive waves crashing against coastlines. Satellites were destroyed in an instant, turned into dust. The message was clear: humanity had no choice. But humans are not a species that surrenders easily. Across Earth, military forces scrambled. Fighter jets launched, though they knew they were useless against such massive ships. Submarines moved silently beneath the oceans, readying their missiles. In hidden bases, experimental weapons were prepared, tools humanity had hoped never to use, but now had no choice. The world united in fear, but also in determination. For the first time in centuries, all of humanity stood together. Borders no longer mattered. Enemies became allies. Humanity looked to the stars and realized they had only two choices: fight or vanish. The coalition, watching from their ships, did not take this seriously. They saw the tiny human fighters, the small ships, and they laughed. To them, humanity's resistance was nothing but desperation. They expected Earth's leaders to kneel once the first cities were destroyed. But humans surprised them. When the coalition ships moved closer, preparing to strike, they were met with a response they had not expected. From hidden bases on the moon and in Earth's orbit, human-built railguns powered up. Massive slugs of metal were launched at speeds faster than sound, tearing into the shields of alien ships. The aliens were shocked. Primitive humans had built weapons strong enough to break through their defenses. The first coalition cruiser exploded, its wreckage scattering across the void. Panic spread through the alien crews. This was not supposed to happen. No young race had ever destroyed one of their ships before. The humans did not stop there. Submarines hidden in Earth's oceans launched nuclear missiles, not at each other this time, but into space. The explosions blinded sensors, damaged more ships, and created chaos in the perfect formations of the alien fleet. Fighter jets, though tiny and fragile, used clever maneuvers to slip past alien defenses, targeting weak points with precision. Every strike was desperate, but every strike was also clever. The aliens realized too late that this would not be an easy victory. Humanity fought not like a race defending its pride, but like a species defending its very existence. Every weapon, every trick, every ounce of energy was used. Where other species might have surrendered to save themselves, humans chose to fight even if it meant death. On the ground, people across the world watched the sky. Explosions lit up the heavens as alien ships burned. The night was no longer dark but glowing with fire. Fear mixed with awe. Humanity was seeing its first war among the stars, and against all odds, they were not losing instantly. In the coalition command ship, the admirals argued. Some demanded full destruction of Earth to end the resistance quickly. Others warned that wiping out humanity might create even more problems. What if the Council was right? What if humans became stronger the more they were threatened? Their debate grew heated, but the fighting outside gave them no time for answers. Because humanity had just begun. Using hidden bases, old satellites, and even hacked alien signals, human commanders turned the battlefield into chaos. The aliens had numbers, power, and experience. The humans had creativity, speed, and a refusal to die. Every plan the coalition tried was met with something new, something they had not expected. The first contact between humanity and the galaxy was no peaceful handshake. It was fire, war, and blood. And for the first time, the aliens realized that perhaps the Council had not been exaggerating. Perhaps humanity truly was dangerous. When the battle finally slowed, wreckage floated across the Sol system. Dozens of alien ships had been destroyed, far more than the coalition ever imagined possible. Humanity had suffered losses too. Entire cities damaged, brave soldiers gone. But Earth still stood. Humanity still stood. The coalition had expected surrender. Instead, they had found resistance. Instead of fear, they had awakened fury. And as their fleets pulled back to regroup, one thought spread across every alien commander's mind. This was only the beginning. The battle in the Sol system had shaken the galaxy. The coalition fleet, which had expected an easy victory, had instead tasted defeat. For the first time in their history, they lost ships to a species so young, so inexperienced, that they were supposed to be no threat at all. The coalition still outnumbered humanity, still had greater weapons, still had centuries of experience, but the damage had been done. Humanity had proved they could fight back. On Earth, the mood had changed. Fear was still there, but it burned now with anger. The first alien strike had destroyed satellites, hit oceans, and damaged cities. Thousands of lives had been lost. Families grieved, children cried, and leaders stood before their people with heavy hearts. But instead of despair, a new feeling grew in humanity: determination. If aliens thought Earth would surrender, they were wrong. Across the planet, every factory, every base, every scientist, and every soldier worked together. Nations that once fought each other now shared their secrets. Engineers designed weapons faster than ever before. Old projects once hidden in dusty archives were brought to life: new spacecraft, advanced missiles, and experimental energy systems. Humanity had been pushed into a corner, and when humans were cornered, they became dangerous. The leaders of Earth agreed on one thing: they could not just sit and wait for the coalition to return with more ships. If they did, Earth would surely fall. The only hope was to strike first, to hit the coalition where it hurt, to show them that humans were not prey but predators. Humanity had never gone beyond its solar system in force, but now they would. The first true human warfleet was born. It was small compared to the alien armadas, dozens of ships instead of hundreds. Some were hastily modified cargo haulers turned into battleships. Others were experimental craft that had never been tested in real combat. But what they lacked in size, they made up for in creativity. Railguns were mounted on freighters. Stealth systems were built from scavenged technology. Even civilian ships were armored and armed. Every vessel was a symbol of human defiance. When the fleet was ready, the world watched as it left Earth orbit. People stood in the streets, looking up at the sky, knowing their sons and daughters were going to fight for survival. Some wept, some prayed, and some simply whispered a single word: win. The human fleet moved with one goal: to find and strike a coalition outpost that supplied their invading ships. Scouts had tracked the alien retreat. They found a staging ground hidden near a red dwarf star, where coalition warships repaired and resupplied before returning to battle. It was here that humanity would make their first true strike beyond their home. As the human ships approached, tension filled every crew. No one knew if their weapons would work in a real fight so far from Earth. No one knew if they would come back. But there was no turning back. Humanity had already chosen its path. The attack began with silence. Human stealth ships, small and hard to detect, slipped into the enemy's formation. They carried nuclear warheads, not as bombs to drop, but as traps. They planted them near fuel stations and supply depots. Then, at the signal, the void lit up. Explosions shook the alien outpost as massive fireballs ripped through storage bays. Coalition ships scrambled in confusion, their sensors blinded, their commanders shouting orders too late. That was when the main human fleet arrived. Dozens of ships came out of the darkness, railguns firing. Slugs of metal, simple but deadly, tore into alien shields. Missiles streaked across the black sky, guided with precision. The coalition tried to regroup, but the humans never gave them a chance. They struck fast, they struck hard, and they struck with a fury no one had expected. The aliens had assumed humans would defend, that they would stay near Earth like frightened children. They had never imagined that humans would leave their home and bring the fight to them. The surprise was total. One by one, coalition cruisers fell. Their formations broke apart. Their commanders panicked as the humans fought with no hesitation. Inside the human ships, crews cheered as the first alien destroyer exploded in a burst of fire. They cheered again when their missiles struck the coalition's command vessel, tearing it apart. For the first time, humanity had not just defended, they had taken the war to their enemy. The battle lasted hours, but in the end, the humans were victorious. The coalition outpost was nothing but wreckage. The surviving alien ships fled into the stars, carrying with them a story they would never forget. Humanity had left their cradle, and humanity was not afraid. When the human fleet returned home, battered but alive, the world erupted in celebration. People filled the streets, waving flags, shouting, crying with joy. They had done the impossible. They had struck the enemy and won. Humanity, for the first time, had written its name in the stars with fire. But not everyone celebrated. In the halls of the coalition, the news spread like wildfire. Admirals and rulers listened in disbelief. How could a young race, with no empire and no fleets, destroy one of their strongholds? Some demanded vengeance. Others began to fear. The Council's warning, once laughed at, now echoed in their minds. Humanity was dangerous. Humanity was unpredictable. And humanity had just proven it. Back on Earth, leaders knew this was only the beginning. The coalition would not forgive this defeat. They would return, stronger than before. But humanity no longer feared them. They had seen the enemy bleed, and they knew now that they could win. The first strike had been made, and the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. The destruction of the coalition's outpost sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Never before had such a young race struck so boldly. Never before had a primitive species defeated fleets that had ruled the stars for centuries. The coalition, once so confident, now felt the sting of humiliation. Their leaders met in secret chambers, their voices filled with anger. They swore that humanity would pay for what they had done. For the coalition, this was no longer about controlling a young species. It had become a matter of pride, of revenge. They could not allow the galaxy to believe that fragile humans could destroy their fleets and go unpunished. To restore their honor, they prepared for war on a scale Earth had never seen before. Hundreds of ships were built or pulled from reserve fleets. Entire armadas were ordered to gather. Soldiers were trained, weapons loaded, and strategies written. The coalition believed that if their first attack had failed, then they simply needed to strike with more force. If one fleet was not enough, then 10 fleets would be. If humans had defended their home once, then this time the coalition would burn that home to ashes. But humanity was not waiting. After their first strike, Earth had changed forever. Factories ran day and night, building new weapons, new ships, and new defenses. Scientists who once dreamed of peaceful exploration now worked to design engines of war. Engineers built orbital platforms armed with massive railguns. Every ocean hid submarines ready to launch missiles into space. Humanity had been awakened, and they were preparing for a storm. The coalition believed humans were reckless, but they were wrong. Humanity was careful. They knew they could not face the coalition's full numbers head-on. Instead, they planned to fight in ways the aliens would not expect. They studied the coalition's movements, intercepted their communications, and sent small fleets to harass them. When the coalition armadas began their march toward Earth, they did not face one big battle. Instead, they faced 1,000 small ones. Human ships appeared from asteroid fields, striking supply convoys before vanishing again. Missiles hidden inside drifting rocks suddenly came to life, slamming into fuel ships. Communication arrays were jammed by human hackers, leaving alien fleets blind and confused. The coalition grew frustrated. They wanted a clean, decisive war. But humanity gave them chaos. The aliens tried to form tight formations, only for humans to break them apart with tricks and traps. Every time the coalition thought they had humans cornered, the humans found a way out. Every time the aliens tried to strike, they found themselves ambushed instead. The war spread beyond Earth. Battles erupted in asteroid belts, in the darkness of gas giant systems, and even in the empty space between stars. Humans, who had once never left their home system, now fought across the galaxy's edges. They were small in number, but their courage made them seem larger. Each victory, no matter how small, became a story that inspired the rest of Earth to fight harder. On Earth itself, people lived with constant fear. Sirens warned of incoming strikes, cities built shelters, and families prayed for safety. But the fear was mixed with pride. Every new broadcast showing alien ships destroyed brought cheers in the streets. Humanity was suffering, yes, but humanity was also proving to the galaxy that they would not break. The coalition's leaders grew desperate. More fleets were sent. More weapons were used. Planets were set aside as supply bases for the war. But the harder they tried, the more humans adapted. The aliens fought with rules, traditions, and strategies they had used for centuries. Humans broke every rule, invented new strategies, and learned faster than anyone thought possible. An alien admiral once mocked humans as children with fire. Now, those same aliens whispered another word for them: monsters. Not because humans were cruel, but because humans refused to stop. They fought after losses that would have broken any other species. They fought even when outnumbered, even when victory seemed impossible. One battle in particular shook the galaxy's view forever. The Coalition launched a massive armada of hundreds of ships against a human fleet of only 20. By numbers alone, the humans should have been crushed. But instead of meeting the enemy directly, the humans lured them into a dense asteroid field. There, the aliens' size became a weakness. Their massive ships could not maneuver, their weapons fired blindly. Meanwhile, the humans weaved through the rocks, striking from all sides. When the battle was over, the Coalition had lost dozens of ships. The humans had lost only a few. News of this spread quickly. Species who had once laughed at the Council's warning now began to doubt. If humans could defeat the Coalition again and again, what would they become in another century? Or in another 1,000 years? The war was no longer just between the Coalition and humanity. It had become a spectacle for the galaxy. Some species watched with fear. Others watched with secret hope. For races who had long been oppressed by the Coalition, humanity was a symbol. They were proof that even the strongest empires could bleed. But for the Coalition, it was a nightmare. They had thought themselves hunters, yet they were becoming prey. Every victory they tried to claim came at too high a cost. Every step they took forward left wreckage behind. Humanity was forcing them into a war they could not win cleanly. And through it all, the Council remained silent. They had given their warning, and it had been ignored. Now they watched as their words unfolded in fire. They knew this was only the middle of the story. Humanity had not yet revealed its full strength. The Coalition had expanded the war, but in doing so, they had awakened something far greater than they could control. The galaxy, once united in dismissing humans as weak, was beginning to change. The question was no longer whether humanity would survive. The question was how far humanity would go once survival was secured. The war between humanity and the Coalition had stretched on longer than anyone expected. What was supposed to be a quick victory for the aliens had turned into a grinding struggle. Fleet after fleet had been sent to crush the humans, but none of them returned unscarred. Some never returned at all. For the first time in centuries, the Coalition's pride began to crack. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Alien traders carried stories of human victories from one world to another. Soldiers who had faced them and lived told tales of battles where humans fought with terrifying determination. The more the Coalition tried to hide their losses, the louder the rumors became. Soon, every corner of the galaxy had heard of Earth, the small blue planet that refused to die. Among the Coalition leaders, fear began to replace arrogance. Meetings that were once filled with mocking laughter now echoed with arguments. Some demanded that the war continue no matter the cost. Others suggested peace, fearing that the Council's warning had been true all along. But pride kept them from admitting defeat. They could not allow the galaxy to see them bow before a young race. On Earth, the situation was no easier. Cities were scarred, and lives had been lost. Every family had someone missing, either fighting in space or killed in the alien attacks. But instead of breaking, humanity hardened. Factories ran endlessly, building more ships. Scientists unlocked new ideas every day, fueled by desperation. Children grew up faster, learning the meaning of sacrifice. Humanity had become united in a way it never had before. The turning point came during a massive battle near a gas giant on the edge of human space. The Coalition had sent one of its largest armadas yet. Hundreds of ships armed with weapons strong enough to shatter moons. Their goal was simple: wipe out the human fleet once and for all. They believed this final strike would end the war. The humans, however, had prepared carefully. They knew they could not match the Coalition's numbers head-on. Instead, they studied the battlefield, using the gas giant's swirling storms and rings to their advantage. As the alien fleet entered the system, human ships were already waiting, hidden in the planet's shadow. The battle began with sudden violence. Human warships launched missiles from behind the gas giant's rings, catching the Coalition by surprise. Explosions lit up the darkness, and alien formations were thrown into chaos. The coalition tried to regroup, but the humans struck again, appearing from unexpected angles, disappearing back into the planet's storms. Hours passed, and the battlefield turned into a maze of fire. The coalition lost ship after ship, but still they pushed forward, confident their greater numbers would eventually overwhelm the humans. That was when humanity revealed its true strategy. Hidden within the gas giants' rings were massive weapons, railguns mounted on asteroids, powered by reactors secretly built over months. When the coalition's main fleet moved into position, those weapons came to life. Slugs of metal the size of buildings shot through space, tearing into alien flagships. Shields shattered, hulls split open, and commanders were killed before they even understood what was happening. The alien fleet fell into disarray. The humans did not waste a single chance. They charged forward, their ships weaving through the wreckage, targeting the weakest points. Every shot they fired was precise, every move calculated. For the first time, the coalition did not just lose ships, they lost control of the battle completely. When the smoke cleared, the impossible had happened. One of the largest coalition armadas had been destroyed, not by another ancient empire, but by the humans they had once mocked as children. Out of hundreds of ships, only a handful escaped to tell the story. The news of this victory spread faster than light. Across the galaxy, species who had once ignored the humans now looked at them with awe and fear. If humanity could destroy fleets so much larger than their own, what would they do when they grew stronger? What would they do when their numbers matched the coalition's? The coalition could no longer deny the truth. Their fleets were being bled dry. Their soldiers were demoralized. Their leaders argued constantly, blaming each other for failures. The war that was supposed to prove their superiority had instead revealed their weakness. Humanity had turned their arrogance into their downfall. On Earth, the victory was celebrated, but it was not without sorrow. Thousands of humans had still died in the fighting. Families grieved, and the scars of war deepened. Yet in every tear, there was pride. Humanity had stood against the greatest armies the galaxy had ever known, and won. The Council, watching from afar, remained silent but thoughtful. They had warned the galaxy about humanity, and now their warning was unfolding in full. They knew what the coalition had failed to understand. Once awakened, humanity would never stop. The question was no longer whether humans could survive, but how far they would go. This battle marked the turning point. The coalition no longer had the upper hand. Humanity was no longer just defending its homeworld. It was taking the war into enemy territory, forcing even the proudest empires to reconsider their place in the galaxy. The galaxy had laughed at the Council's warning once. Now, no one was laughing. Every ruler, every admiral, every leader looked to the stars and wondered what would happen when humanity's fire spread beyond survival, when they turned from defense to conquest. The coalition had meant to crush humanity and end the war. Instead, they had given birth to something far greater, a legend, a force that would shape the future of every world. Humanity had turned the tide, and from that moment forward, the galaxy would never be the same. The coalition had thought itself invincible. For centuries, they ruled the galaxy with unquestioned power. They believed their fleets could not be challenged, their technology could not be matched, and their armies could not be broken. When the Council warned them about humans, they laughed, saying no young species could ever be a threat. But now, after countless battles and staggering losses, they were finally beginning to understand the price of their arrogance. World after world in the coalition's territory felt the weight of the war. Shipyards that once produced endless fleets now sat in silence, their resources drained. Supply lines stretched thin, as more and more ships were lost in the fighting. The proud admirals who once boasted of easy victory now whispered behind closed doors, afraid to face the truth. They had underestimated the humans, and that mistake was costing them everything. The stories of human victories spread like wildfire. Refugees from war-torn planets spoke of human ships appearing out of nowhere, striking with precision, and disappearing before alien fleets could respond. Traders told tales of how small human fleets had destroyed entire armadas. Even alien soldiers began to whisper that fighting humans was different from any other battle. They fought not only with weapons but with a fire in their spirit that could not be crushed. On many coalition planets, ordinary people began to question their leaders. Why had they provoked the humans? Why had they ignored the Council's warning? Families mourned sons and daughters lost in distant battles, and the people grew restless. For the first time, cracks appeared not just in the fleets, but in the very foundation of the coalition itself. Meanwhile, humanity continued to rise. Every loss they suffered only hardened their resolve. Every city destroyed by alien attacks was rebuilt stronger. Every human who fell in battle inspired 10 more to take their place. What the coalition had not understood was that humans were not simply fighting for pride or conquest. They were fighting for survival. And survival gave them a strength that empires built on arrogance could never match. The Council watched carefully, silent but knowing. They had tried to warn the galaxy, but no one had listened. Now, the price of that ignorance was being paid in blood and fire. They saw how humanity grew with every battle, how quickly they adapted, how fiercely they defended one another. The Council realized that the war was no longer just about Earth. It was about the future of the galaxy itself. The greatest sign of the Coalition's weakness came during a battle near one of their core worlds. The planet was heavily defended, with massive orbital stations and entire fleets standing guard. For generations, it had been considered untouchable. But when the humans attacked, they fought with such ferocity that the Coalition's defenses crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. In just days, the once proud world was left scarred, its defenses shattered, its people left in shock. The Coalition had ignored the Council's words. They thought humanity was a small problem, one that could be crushed quickly. But that ignorance now threatened their very existence. Entire fleets had been destroyed, countless lives lost, and their enemies were no longer just humans. Fear and doubt now lived within their own borders. For the humans, the cost was heavy too. They had lost fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters. Their homeworld carried scars that would take generations to heal. Yet in every loss, they found strength. They did not see themselves as victims, but as survivors. And the more the Coalition pushed them, the stronger they became. The turning point had already passed, but in Part 7, the consequences became clear. The Coalition could no longer hide the truth from its people or itself. They had made the greatest mistake possible in war. They had underestimated their enemy. Their arrogance blinded them, and their refusal to listen to the Council's warning had doomed them to fight a war they could not win. Across the galaxy, smaller species watched with wide eyes. Some had once feared the Coalition, believing no one could challenge their power. But now, those same species whispered that humanity might be the new power to rise, a force greater than the Coalition ever was. Many secretly hoped for human victory, while others feared what it might mean if such a fierce and determined species gained control of the stars. The Coalition leaders sat in silence, meeting in their great halls, staring at reports filled with endless losses. Each page was a reminder of their failure. Each casualty was a price paid for ignoring the Council. They had believed themselves safe, untouchable, eternal. But in their ignorance, they had awakened a storm they could not control. And so, the price of that ignorance was written across the stars. Shattered fleets drifting in silence, burned worlds scarred by battle, and a rising human race whose name would forever echo in the history of the galaxy. But for humanity, the war was not yet over. They had shown their strength, but they knew the Coalition would not surrender easily. More battles lay ahead, more sacrifices to be made. The difference was that now, the galaxy finally understood what the Council had tried to say all along. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not fragile. Humanity was a force that could not be ignored. The Coalition had learned this truth the hard way, and they had paid the price. The war had dragged on for years, leaving behind a trail of destruction across the galaxy. The Coalition, once proud and powerful, was broken. Their fleets were shattered, their armies defeated, and their citizens had lost faith in their leaders. What had begun as a confident march to crush a young species had turned into a nightmare. Humanity, the very species they once mocked and underestimated, had risen higher than anyone imagined. When the last great coalition fleet fell, silence spread across the stars. Their admirals, once arrogant and boastful, now stood in shock as human warships entered their space without fear. They had thought humans were just survivors defending their world, but now it was clear, humans were more than that. They were builders, warriors, and visionaries. They had not only defended their home, they had carved a place for themselves among the stars. On Earth, the people mourned the countless lives lost, but they also stood proud. The war had cost them dearly, yet it had also united them in ways they had never known before. Different nations, once divided by borders and politics, now worked as one. Humanity had discovered a strength within itself that went beyond technology or weapons. It was a strength born from unity, resilience, and an unshakable will to survive. Other species across the galaxy watched carefully. Some had feared humanity, but many had begun to admire them. They saw how humans fought not for conquest, but for survival and justice. They saw how, even in victory, humans did not seek to enslave or destroy, but to protect their people and ensure no one could ever threaten them again. For many smaller species living under the shadow of the coalition, humans became a symbol of hope. The Council, who had given the first warning, now spoke with new respect. They had long known the potential of humanity, but even they had not predicted how quickly the humans would rise. In private discussions, Council members admitted that the galaxy had changed forever. The old balance of power was gone. A new age was beginning, and at the center of it stood humanity. The coalition finally sued for peace. Their leaders, broken and humbled, came before human representatives. For the first time in centuries, they were not the ones dictating terms. They were the ones begging for mercy. Humanity listened. They did not demand the destruction of their enemies, though many had reason to seek revenge. Instead, they set terms that would ensure the coalition could never threaten Earth again. Their fleets were dismantled, their control over weaker species was ended, and their arrogance was stripped away. This act surprised many. The galaxy had expected humans to respond with the same cruelty the coalition had once shown. But humanity was different. They were not conquerors. They were survivors who understood the value of peace. This decision earned them even greater respect. Some species even pledged alliances with humanity, seeing them not just as warriors but as potential protectors. Still, the rise of humanity was not without fear. Whispers spread among alien leaders. If humans could grow this strong so quickly, what would they become in 1,000 years? Would they remain protectors, or would they one day become the new rulers of the galaxy? No one could answer these questions, but everyone knew that humanity had earned a seat at the table of galactic power, and that seat could never be taken away. For humans, the future stretched wide and endless. The scars of war remained, but so did the lessons learned. They understood now that the galaxy was vast, dangerous, and full of challenges. But they also knew they had the strength to face those challenges. They had fought against the greatest power in the galaxy and survived. More than that, they had won. On the night of the victory celebrations, as fireworks lit the skies of Earth and voices cheered across every city, a quiet truth settled in the hearts of humanity. They had once been a species struggling to leave their homeworld, unsure if they could survive in the wider galaxy. Now, they were a people who had stood against an empire and proven themselves. They were no longer the newcomers. They were no longer the ones being underestimated. They were a force that the galaxy would forever remember. The rise of humanity was not just about war. It was about identity. It was about discovering who they truly were when faced with extinction. It was about finding unity in the face of chaos and courage in the face of fear. And now, with the stars stretched out before them, they knew their story was only beginning. The Council had once warned the galaxy about humans, but no one had listened. The coalition had laughed and ignored the warning, and they had paid the ultimate price. Now, the entire galaxy understood. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not fragile. Humanity was strong, determined, and unbreakable. In the quiet after the war, as human ships traveled deeper into space, their names spread like a legend across the stars. Some spoke it with admiration, others with fear, but all with respect. For in the galaxy's darkest hour, humanity had risen, and nothing would ever be the same again.